Hey there YouTube, Travis here. So we are continuing work on this very well-loved Tomos Targa A35. In the previous video, we did a full engine rebuild of the A35, and now our mission is to get this thing starting easily and idling well. I have some suspicions. Like every good moped problem you're going to tackle, the first thing to do is really to check for air leaks. I have a real sneaking suspicion about the oil injection port, which I chose to block off. I chucked a vacuum cap on there, and I know that that's not really the answer. So we're gonna go ahead, put a bolt in there. We're gonna check torque, because I did have this running for a little bit on our head nuts, our exhaust, and of course the intake, and we'll see where we go from there. So we've got a 12mm bolt right here. Let's go ahead and get the carb out of the way so we can look at this intake situation a little easier. Fueled off. Yeah, I feel really silly for thinking that'd even be close to acceptable. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing off. Okay, so here's our bolt. This is just an M6 bolt, and I've got couple of replacement options here. The Moped Army Wiki says an M6 by 8mm, which is on the smaller side, and that makes sense because you're not going to have this oil injection unit which acts like a giant washer. So we're looking about that. That should be just fine. I don't want to get it too deep. So we'll take this bolt. We're going to apply just a little bit of Moto Seal around it, not a lot. But this is something that will just make sure we don't have any leaks around there. And again, you want to use something like Moto Seal that resists oil and gas. And just get that nice and snug with the 1/4-inch drive. All right, let's check those torque specs. Usually your exhaust will loosen up the most on heat cycling when you first run a new engine, but we're still good here on both sides. And these are all feeling pretty good too. Closer. All right, so what did I check from here? So it's been a couple days. You know, this bike isn't really idling. The power's kind of inconsistent. I had a shakedown ride that went really poorly. So we went ahead and checked the usual suspects. Checked compression. I went over to a buddy's house. He's got a way better compression tester than me. It was reading pretty high on the above 90. So that, to me, felt okay, especially with that long hose compression tester. You know, air leak check, was able to check everything except for the crank seals, which again are brand new, so totally possible they pop out. I've seen that happen. But I'm really hoping that wasn't the case on this one, and it ended up not being. So we've looked at, you know, compression, we've looked at air leaks. Other really common moped problems are poorly jetted carburetor or dirty carburetor. So I went ahead and went through it. It's a Delorto 1412 Shaw, so that takes all of 2 minutes. Clean as a whistle. Fuel flow from the tank is great. Carb was nice and clean. I did see it has a 68 jet inside it, which, given that this is a stock cylinder combined with just a bi-turbo pipe, is probably on the high side. I imagine the previous owner was jetting for air leaks. Actually, most certainly this bike has always had an enormous exhaust leak as long as I've known it, up until now, obviously. So yeah, I had a really fun shakedown ride. You ever have those rides where you're riding and you get like 2 miles from your house and then the bike starts breaking down, and even trying to get home or to your destination, it just keeps shutting off again and again and again? That was me. It was a lot of fun. I would get it to kick over, man, every 15, 20 kicks, and we'd be good for a couple blocks. I was cursing under my breath whenever someone would let someone cross the street, or we'd get to a car slowing down for a turn, because that was tricky. When I was wide open, it seemed to be okay, but even then, once or twice, it still cut off. Bummer. So the short-term fix was really short-term, but there's a long-term issue that I discovered also. When I got to my buddy's house, that's actually where my Shakedown ride was going, we found out that my spark plug boot and my spark plug, despite it being a practically brand new NGK resistor series BR6HS, was bad. When we put our timing light on it, it wasn't working, and I was like, there's no way the timing light is broken. But the plug, while it would spark, was not really cooperating with the timing light. And also the boot for it, there was no barb on the inside. It was just kind of jammed in there, and the elastic would hold it there. I don't know if that's some weird factory thing or some aftermarket plug, but threw on a nice NGK boot that has a barb inside it that you twist the spark plug wire around, and now we have good connection to the bike. So the bike runs now, but I discovered something else really interesting. So for that long-term issue, obviously as part of checking everything out, I checked the timing. Tomos CDIs are pretty robust, especially these ones from the 90s, A35. I know that the new ones have some gripes, but these are generally pretty robust. And one thing that I found, and remember, I put this stator right back on exactly where it was that the timing was very low. So there's 2 marks on the case on this A35 anyway. There's plenty of pictures of folks who have these motors that don't have any markings on the case, but this one does. And general consensus is that that's retarded and advanced, are the two lines right there. And this thing was timing in like way down here, which is really strange. So I went ahead and rotated the stator all the way clockwise. So I put it at full advance. And even at full advance, when you put the timing light on, we were just at the bottom of the cases right here with this light. So this is really interesting to me. Again, this is a keyed crankshaft. So there's a little woodruff key. This one looks like a little pin that sits on the crank. And this flywheel only goes on in one position. Now, with CDIs, the stator and the flywheel, there's a place where no matter what, it will always fire when you hit that mark. A really good explanation, the YouTube video that Cornped put out for timing an HPI actually describes it really well. With the HPI, they come with a mark for an E50 and a ZA50, and it will fire at that mark no matter what. On a points ignition system, it's whenever the points are just beginning to open, and that's an additional variable. But again, we're working with a CDI here, so we're firing pretty low according to the case. But I wanted to know for sure what my timing actually was. So out comes our friend, Mr. Buzetti micrometer. So these tools are really handy for setting timing. This is where, when you see timing presented as millimeters before top dead center, this is where you can actually measure that. In the POOK world, a lot of people like to talk about degrees before top dead center. There's a conversion chart in the POOK factory manual, but I wanted to see exactly where I was, millimeters before top dead center. So for the first thing that I did here to actually measure that was I, hit the timing light with the motor running, or even just turning over would show that. And again, it's right at the bottom of the cases right here. It's actually more right about right there. So next, I went ahead and took the tool. I screwed it into the head because I'm going to find top dead center. And this tool is really nice because with the bolt here loosened, it has this plunger which moves. And so you just rotate the flywheel until the plunger comes all the way out and then just barely starts to come back down, and then you put it back and you find that perfect spot where the piston is at its highest travel position. So we find top dead center. We mark that as 0, so we're zeroed out at top dead center, and then we tighten down on our bolt.
So with the bolt pushing against the plunger, if you rotate this, the plunger will move. So figuring out where I was in millimeters before top dead center, because each space here is 1 millimeter, was as simple as rotating back, so the piston would come back down to the point, because obviously this had moved to find top dead center, at the point where the timing light was showing that the firing was happening. And then obviously our plunger is still stuck at top dead center, so I simply rotated this until it touched the piston. So it made one full revolution, and then it came to rest at 2. So what this means, so that's 1.2, so one full rotation plus 2 more millimeters. So what this means is that this timing is set at 1.2 millimeters before top dead center with the stator rotated all the way to the right. Remember, this motor spins counterclockwise, just like a Puch ZA50. So we're at 1.2 millimeters before top dead center. The factory manual specifies, I believe, 1.5 millimeters to 1.7 millimeters. 1.5 would be ideal. But we're at 1.2, and I cannot rotate this stator any further. And what this leads me to believe, unfortunately, is that the flywheel, the key, is actually put at the incorrect spot. It's just slightly off of where it's supposed to be. Now, that might make me feel a little crazy, but if you look at some of the other aftermarket cranks, specifically the top A3 aftermarket crank on Treats, you'll see 2 other reviewers have reported that the keyway is machined in the incorrect spot. Now, that being said, even with the timing at 1.2 millimeters before top dead center, which is pretty retarded, the bike actually runs great. It's got good power, it's got good pickup and go. This is a pretty mild setup with a stock cylinder. But if I wanted to advance this timing any further, I've got 2 options. So the first, you can probably imagine, a lot of people throw around on Moped Army when they want to usually do lower timing, but in my bizarro world, we're trying to get more advanced timing, is they'll take the slots of the stator and they'll Dremel them a little bit so that you can rotate it even further. So that's an option to mar up the stator and be able to do that. But the simpler solution would be to pull the flywheel again, remove the flywheel key, and then time this without a flywheel key, which in the world of aftermarket CDIs is actually pretty common. So not the end of the world. It's a very similar exercise where you find top dead center, you push the piston back down to, say, 1.5 millimeters if you want to set it there, and then you push the flywheel on. And the challenging part is you need to zip the flywheel nut down to push this there and keep the flywheel and the stator in the exact same position. You need to zip that down without the piston moving an inch, or I should say a millimeter, which actually might be a little challenging because you'd be zipping it to the right to tighten it, but the motor spins counterclockwise. And so it'd be pretty easy for the flywheel to pull the piston down a little bit. So it could totally be done. Again, as it sits right now, I don't need to do anything. I am pretty satisfied with the performance of this. But that's just an area where, if you persist long enough trying to work on mopeds, you will get it. You will figure it out. But one of the ways that the cards are stacked against you is if you've got parts that kind of set you up to fail to begin with. And that's tricky. And that took some extra thought to get to that. But no matter what, we've got a nice running bike. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take this thing on a real shakedown ride.
So let's call that the real shakedown ride. We're back. We just beat the rain, which has just started to come down. And like any good shakedown ride, got a nice list of things that we're going to cover in a future video here. But for now, I'm feeling way more confident about this motor rebuild. This bike is really getting there, at least from a mechanical standpoint. So a lot left to cover on this thing. The throttle cable has some slack. You still get all the way open, but it's just real funky. Both brakes stick. The lights work when they want to. Because the fender was chopped shorter in the rear, there's no license plate holder. I think the 68 jet in there is way too big. I'm going to cut that down about 4 sizes to a 64, see how the bike performs. I might do that easy mod where you overfill the transmission a little bit to delay the shift time. I may modify the slide on the 1412 Sha, because right now I'm maxed in and I think I could get a little bit better idle. This bike has no fuel filter, so we'll get brand new fuel line, a fuel filter, stock size handlebars for sure, and my poor back with those M bars. We're going to fix the seat because what is on there right now is quite not comfortable. Rewire, of course, and that will include moving the kill switch and the voltage regulator somewhere way more acceptable. I am more than I think about it, wanting to remove the woodruff key and adjust the timing to 1.5 millimeters before top dead center, and I'll do that at the lowest timing position to allow me to rotate it further if I want to advance it. It's starting on kick number 2 or number 3. It's not really that one kick that I'm hoping for with a good CDI bike, which is why I'm thinking that. The kickstand needs adjusted because it's either bent or not installed properly or needs lubricated. It's real stiff right now. And then get rid of the remaining oil injection stuff that's still dangling off the side of the bike. But this thing is really coming along. I'm really happy with it. Again, I was quite nervous, having never teared into a 2-speed moped before, but this thing makes pretty good power on the straightaways, and I'm feeling a lot better about it. All right there, YouTube. Well, the only direction we can go from here is up, so I hope you enjoyed that video. Until next time.